to have to wait is really hard when you can't control things.
Every other job I work, there's no fulfillment, but yet there is no other open door. It's like you're telling me to do one thing and then you're not providing the opportunities to do it.
It's always in hindsight where we look back and you're like, man, God, I saw you there. But in the moment, we don't always see that.
Moses had every reason to believe. Like you're telling me there's a bush that's on fire and not being consumed, and a voice is coming out of it telling you it's God, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think people desire to know all the details. If I had all the details, I might try to force it for my benefit. But I think when we do that, we take away the glory that is only God's.
And this is the severity that God takes his promises. He's literally saying, Abram, I will do what I'm saying, and if I don't, then split me in half.
That I was so caught up in doing the things for him that I wasn't necessarily being the person that he had called me to be.
When we try to force things to happen, we're actually trying to move into the role of God.
Grab a chair, pour some coffee, take a little time. We're talking Jesus and the gospel with some laughs on the side. From theology to Parthenon topology, we cover it all. Rampage in the lounge. Come and hear what it's about. In the dwelling place lounge, where love is strong and the laughs along. We're a family of friends. Come on and sing along at the dwelling place lounge.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Phillip Jones. I'm the host at the Dwelling Place Lounge, but it's not just me today. I am with the one and only Vanessa Makahele. So, Vanessa, what's your position here at Change Point?
So I'm the children's pastor. So for the Raspberry campus, I lead our children's team. And then I also lead the connection ministry. We haven't had anyone in that role for a while. And so I kind of transitioned into that role as well. So,
nice.
You know,
you do a little bit
rolling.
of lots of things.
Yeah.
Well, we got a great episode for you guys today. This is our last episode on the When Faith Isn't Fun series. But we are talking about waiting. Now, before we, go crazy, what kind of waiting would you say we're talking about?
Well, we're talking about waiting on the Lord. It could be waiting. There's so many ways that people wait. I think Romans 8 just talks about that waiting for things to be right, waiting for restoration.
So we're not talking about waiting in traffic.
We're not talking about waiting in traffic.
There's some sanctification process going on when I have to wait in traffic.
That's right. Well, we have to wait for anything, especially coming from Alaska. If we go to the lower 48 and there's a long line, we're out. Like, we're good.
When I lived in Kotzebue, we would order stuff online and we would get the tracking. And if our packages went through Federal Way, Washington, that was it. You're talking, no joke, 2 or 3 months before you get your package.
No way.
And man, speaking of waiting, my family, the Joneses, we are not keen on patience. I'm almost glad I didn't teach this message because I got to practice what I preach. But yeah,
fair.
We are not talking about that kind of waiting. We're talking about stuff. Well, what are some examples, do you think?
When we're waiting on an answer from the Lord, when we're in a season of a hard season, when you're struggling through things, I think there are times where we don't really understand what we're going through and what the next thing is going to be. And so we're just waiting on what that next thing is going to be. Scripture talks a lot about, when you look at the context of Romans 8, and we're talking about waiting culturally, where they were at was an interesting time. But as believers, there's hope that we hold on to in the waiting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just waiting for that next thing. I think it's so important not to worry about 10 steps down the road when you should just be focusing on this next thing. But waiting is hard, Patience
is something that is definitely hard with waiting. But what are the other reasons that waiting would be so hard?
I think for us, well, I'm going to say for me, waiting is hard because I want things done a particular way and on my timing, And so to have to wait is really hard when you can't control things. And so you're then put in this place of being patient out of your control or trying to control things and make things happen your way, which I highly don't recommend, but that's an option. And I think people just want to do what they want when they want.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up control. You know, this whole series, we've kind of had like a gift and a rejection, like a receive and a reject aspect to these sermons.
Yeah.
For instance, when it came to discipline, if we receive discipline, we grow in holiness, righteousness, sanctification. If we reject it, then we don't grow in that.
Right.
And a lot of the times that can lead to bitterness, anger, resentment. And I think for this, one of the rejections of waiting is control. I mean, honestly, I can't think of a better person to highlight this than Abraham and Sarah. And that's in Genesis chapter 12, I think, is kind of the start of it. But I'll go ahead and read a little bit of this Genesis chapter 12.
Okay.
Abram was already pretty old at the time. And in verse 12, it says, "The Lord said to Abram, go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I'll show you. I'll make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." And it says, so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. So when he got this promise, he was old.
Yeah.
He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his possessions they've accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for a land of Canaan. And when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the side of Shechem, and at the oak of Moreh. At the time, the Canaanites were in the land. And then the Lord appeared to Abram again and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. So Abram has this like first initial call, and this is so theologically rich. I mean, this goes all the way to the New Testament, even into today. But part of this promise is that Abram's going to receive offspring. He's going to receive children. And at the time, children were so incredibly important.
Yeah.
First of all, you're old, so you need kids because they're going to go do all the hunting, fishing, trapping for you.
Yeah,
and they do all the
practically, yeah.
and then you know, inheritance and all kinds of stuff. It was just a totally different culture.
Numbers were important, you know, like to have a lot of offspring was very positive. You know, like it was a good thing to have a lot of kids because you're passing on, you know, you're growing your generation and your family line, you know, and so sons and
Yeah, and
having lots of kids.
And for women, if you didn't have a son, then you essentially don't have retirement.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a huge thing.
And then also for women, I mean, there's stories of women who couldn't have children at all and how they were treated, how they were viewed, how, you know, for them not to be able to have children was a big deal too.
If I was Abram, I'd be okay. I'd be somewhat excited about this because it's like, I will make you into a great nation. I'm like, dude, if God came down to me and said, I'm going to make you into a great nation or a father of many,
Yeah.
I'd be like, sick. That sounds great. But the other side is like, I'm old and I don't know if I really want a baby. I'm 32. I'm
Yeah.
turning 33 this month. My wife wants a third kid. I'm wishy-washy, and part of it is like, dude, being up all night is just getting
That's a
harder
lot.
and harder. Yeah. So at 75, I'm like,
Yeah, that's a lot. I got married at 18, had our daughter at 19, had my youngest, we have 5 kids. So daughter at 19, my youngest, I was like 32, you know? And so there's a big gap between number 3 and number 4. But the difference in how I approach parenting, there's some wisdom over the years,
Yeah.
of course. But the 19-year-old Vanessa was definitely not the patient 32-year-old mom that I was with my youngest. However, the energy that I had was way different. I was so much more tired with the older one, with the youngest one, than I was, you know, full of energy with the oldest. So, yeah, age plays a big part.
And like Sarah or Sarai, she's getting older and older, but yeah, so I just like personally, I cannot imagine having a 75-year-old or having a baby at 75-year-old. I mean, that is my nightmare. And time went on, and time went on, and time went on. And Abram and Sarai are just kind of
Yeah.
still no kids. He has his nephew Lot, but like no
No
kids.
kids.
And so I can understand, verse or chapter 15, we get essentially the same thing. Abram meets Melchizedek, which is this crazy deal, which we'll have to get into that on a different podcast. That's really interesting. But I can't skip over the amazingness of chapter 15. This is what it says. It says, Lord God, what can you give me since I'm childless? Abram is still struggling. It's been years. And like God gave him this promise, hey, I'm going to give you kids and you're going to be this like father of many and like a great nation. And like nothing happens.
Yeah.
And Abram's just getting older. He's not getting younger. Believe it or not, time moved at the same pace it does now back then.
Yeah.
And so God's like, don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great. And he says, Lord God, what can you give me since I'm childless and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? He's saying, I don't have anybody to give anything to.
He says a servant. A servant in my household.
Yeah, not
is
even
gonna
his own
inherit.
kid.
Yeah.
And so Abram continued, look, you've given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir. And I get Abram's frustration.
Yeah.
I think we all have different experiences about what it's like for the Lord to talk to us. And, sometimes we feel like God has called us to something specific or called us into a certain season or whatever. And you're like, okay, I'm ready. Like, for instance, I knew at 4 years old I wanted to be a pastor. I would just fall asleep at the pulpit at my old church. And it was like, that's like my home. That's like my comfort place,
Yeah.
And I grew up knowing I want to be a pastor, getting little like speaking gigs here and there, but nothing big. My wife's plan and I, when we got married, was like, okay, now you're married. We're going to move to San Diego or Seattle, one of the two, and go start a church. And then you can do schooling and like become a nurse. And then that didn't happen. We, just from the advice of people that we trusted, they were like, hey, what you should do is, since Savannah's schooling is going to be all paid for, you should stay in Kotzebue 2 more years, let her finish her nursing, and then start. And I was so frustrated.
Yeah.
Because I'm already, I'm 21 at the time. Like, I'm ready to be a mega church pastor,
Yeah.
And it wasn't happening. Throughout that whole process and like our failures in Colorado and in Kotzebue and stuff, it's just like, dude, God, I can feel that this is what's for me. Every other job I work, there's no fulfillment, there's no peace, there's no nothing, but yet there is no other open door.
Right.
So it's like you're telling me to do one thing and then you're not providing the opportunities to do it.
I feel like my walk with the Lord, so I didn't come to know Jesus until I was in my 20s. I will say that an experience where I've had that was when I came to know Jesus, because I come from a different religious background altogether. And knowing that he was drawing me closer to him, there's so much scripture that I'm like, man, I feel that, of like knowing that by making this decision to follow Jesus, I am leaving behind so much, right? And so it's kind of like, I know you're calling me to this, and yet I'm giving, this is what I'm gonna be leaving behind. But knowing where he has just like called me to just trust him fully with all those things. I mean, it's not as similar, but to me, it's when I think about being called away from something, or like plans not going according to what I would have thought they would have been.
Yep, been there.
Has been the best thing ever. And it's always in hindsight, right? It's always in hindsight where we look back and you're like, man, God, I saw you there. But in the moment, we don't always see that,
You know what that reminds me of is actually with Moses, because I think I've shared this on the show before, but it's kind of a thing I live in, like a scripture I live in. But, you get Moses in Egypt, and then he leaves Egypt and he's with the other people. And then he goes and tries to find this lamb, and he comes across the burning bush, and it's God. Yeah. And God is like, hey, I hear the cries of my people in Egypt. I'm going to rescue them. I'm going to like free them. And I can imagine Moses is like, yeah, dude, you should totally do that.
Yeah.
And then God is like, so you go.
You go, yeah.
and Moses is like, whoa, you had me. I was happy with you doing it, but like you're sending me.
Yeah.
And Moses comes up with excuse after excuse after excuse. And finally, at the end, and the thing that stands out to me the most out of the whole thing is that God looks at doesn't look, but God tells Moses, like, you are going. I'll send your brother Aaron with you. Sure, whatever. We all know how that turned out, but you're going. And then he says, and you will know it's me when you come back on this mountain and worship me.
Yeah.
And that's that same hindsight thing.
Yeah.
Is like, Moses had every reason to believe, even from the calling itself. Like, you're telling me there's a bush that's on fire and not being consumed, and a voice is coming out of it telling you it's God, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you get, the staff turning into a snake and his hand getting all leprous and healed and whatnot. All of those signs, he had every reason to believe. But it wasn't until after he was obedient and he came back on the mountain that he looked back and he was like, this was you, God.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And it's those sorts of scenarios that I think are so important. And in a lot of sense, I wish I could have seen it in the moment. But I know that part of the story is to look back and see things that only he could do.
Yeah.
Only he could have done that way. It was so tailor-made and so perfect for me.
It's like there's absolutely no coincidence. There's no coincidence.
No.
And what's also so funny is that it feels like, this isn't like a biblical principle, so don't get me wrong, but what it feels like is that when God calls you into something and you are not ready for it, it's like he's calling you into it now. Like Moses.
Yeah.
He got called and he had to leave and he was not ready. Abram, on the other hand, was ready.
Right.
And he had to wait. And it's like, why does God do this, man? I mean, he has his reasons, but it's like, this is a lot.
It's a lot. And I think part of it is the story that he's writing in the lives of these people that'll be told for generations to come. You look at Abraham's story and it's like these stories that we are reading about him in the waiting is a story that God wrote specifically for Abraham because he knew we would be reading this one day. For the people that are waiting and wondering, there are examples in the Bible, and for the people that are called immediately, there are examples in the Bible,
Yeah, like no matter where you are in life, there is somebody that you can glean not just truth, but biblical wisdom, truth from.
Yeah.
And so here's Abram. God is saying like, hey, I know you've waited and this is coming. But what's so incredible about it is then in verse 4, God responds and he says, now the word of the Lord came to him. This one will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. And he took him outside and he said, look at the sky and count the stars if you're able to count them. Then he said, if your offspring will be that numerous. I always try to put myself in the shoes of the people at the time. But the thing is, they didn't really have shoes at the time, maybe like some sandals, so it's harder. But this sounds better than what God said even the first time.
Right.
And I think that that's part of why waiting is so important, because 100% of the time, what God has you wait for is better than what you've even expected.
Yeah, it's beyond what you can fathom. And I think that's the beauty of waiting. Instead of trying to control the things that you can control, just trusting him, because knowing that he can do immeasurably more than we could ever fathom is something we can't even comprehend. And that's a God thing. That just goes to show you, like, that is God. Like, God does things you can't even process. I always think of my teenager. He'll say things like, "No, trust, Mom, trust." You know what I mean? And that's and in this scenario, it's kind of like that, where God is like, "Trust, I got this."
Yeah.
Like, now let me give you a little glimpse of what I'm talking about. Go look at the sky. You see all those stars up there? As many as you can count. That'll be your future generations. I don't know how Abraham processed that. I can imagine it was a mind blown moment where he's
it had
like,
to have been.
"What?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you take his age into consideration, but also, how can you have that many kids?
Yeah, how is that possible?
And why would you want to,
Yeah.
So I feel like surely he knew that maybe God had something even more in store, because he's like, okay, God must be talking more than just like, he is going to give me a physical heir, but there has to be something else too. And that is the joy of waiting. And we'll get more into this as we go, but it's that I always like to say that God's not in the business of wasting your time.
Yeah.
If he has you waiting, it's because there is something coming.
Yeah.
And it's better than you imagine. Just like with what I said earlier about waiting, about becoming a pastor and starting a church. like if we would have gone, it would have been the worst.
Yeah.
First of all, my theology is whack. In fact, I didn't even really believe I thought theology and doctrine was like a dirty word at the time.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, like I just got married. I didn't even know how to run a marriage yet. How was I going to run my church? I mean, not that you have to be married to run a church, but maybe I should have just focused on that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. We want all the things, you know. I sometimes with my kids, I have all these parenting one-liners. They're the best. But I always tell my kids, the problem with people who know it all is there's nothing new for them to learn. You know, and I think sometimes when we try to take control of certain things, when God is like, no, listen, I have this bird's eye view of all the things. Like, I know where this goes if you would just trust me to lead you. But for us, we're such a instant gratification, like right here, right now, that we can't, sometimes we have to look beyond that. And that's something that God really guides us through. But imagine if, right? Imagine if you would have just, you know, gone and done the things you wanted the way you wanted.
Like he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that, just bringing it to like a pastoral level, you might wonder why old pastors like Billy Graham and Adrian Rogers, R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur, like they were constantly in their word. And you think, and I mean, I made this post about my grandma the other day. She just passed away. She was like 80 something. And I was gifted her Bible, and every single page was just highlighted top to bottom, circles, words. She even in the New Testament, whenever they referred to Jesus with like a lowercase H, she went through every one and scribbled it out and capitalized the H in every single one. Like, it was so funny. It was such an admirable thing for me to like just flip through and see.
What a gift. What a beautiful
It's
gift.
a beautiful gift. And what I see in it is that the reason why older people are constantly still in their Bible is because the more you learn about God, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yeah.
He's infinite, and just the tiniest little like small nugget of truth, it changes who you are.
Yeah.
It affects everything about you.
The fabric of your life. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, so
That's the wisdom that we have in our grandparents and Abrahams and
yeah,
you know.
yeah. You never stop learning.
Yeah.
But it's like with your wife or your husband, you know, you don't just stop at what their favorite color and favorite meal is so you can.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's so interesting. We were talking a couple of days ago about we were starting a ministry plan for next year, and you know, what has God shown us this last year, and what should we focus on in the year ahead? And we were talking about connecting with the people who we're doing ministry with, and ways that we can connect. What are some fun ways that we can connect with them? And I was sharing a story about one of the activities that we did in the past with our volunteers, and we played the newlywed game. The problem with the newlywed game is the reason why it's called the newlywed game is it's designed for newlyweds. You get some couples in there, like me and my husband, who've been married close to 30 years. If you ask what my favorite movie is, the newlyweds are going to get it. The 30-year-old couples are going to be like, which year? You know,
Yeah.
because there's so much that we've walked through in life that, yeah, my favorite movie in 1997 was this, but is that what she's talking about? Like, what is her ultimate favorite movie? And I feel like that's how it is with the word, is it'll never get old. You're always going to glean something new. There's always something new to learn. And even in every different season of life we're in, we could read the same passage and God will show us something different about his character and who he is and how it applies to us in that season. And so it's true. Just reading it a few times in that season is great. Doesn't mean you've learned everything that you're going to ever need to know.
Well, and if you're anything like me, I think this is super applicable for like new believers, or you're coming back from summer camp or a conference or something. Is like you are so on fire and so eager to know the Lord that you just want to know it all right now, right this second. Like, that's super admirable. I mean, don't lose that fire, but also give yourself patience. Well, for one, God's not going anywhere.
No.
And for two, you're going to be 100 years old and have read your Bible 100 times and will not even be scratching the surface.
Not at all.
So continue reading, continue praying, like desire that intimate relationship with the Lord. Don't be frustrated that you're not where you want to be yet.
Right.
You know, God is doing something in your life and in your heart. And sometimes he wants you to take the truths that you learn and soak them in and like apply them and,
Yeah, and just sit in that. It's you don't always, it doesn't have to be an immediate thing. A lot of times we'll read scripture over and over and over again. You meditate on the word, you marinate in it. And I think that's what's so helpful for us in our walk, is to be able to recall and to like when we're talking about like prayer can be in the morning, it can be before bed, and prayer can be a conversation throughout the whole day. Prayer can be your conversation with the Lord as you're driving down the road. With the word, it's the same way. It's you read it whenever you're reading it, and you're meditating on it throughout the day as you're living life. You're applying it as you're interacting with people, as you're doing your job, as you're just walking through the day. It's a constant.
Yeah. And there will certainly be, like, if you are a new believer or not even a new believer, but you just started taking this actually seriously, there will be a discrepancy between the person who's been at it for 60 years and you who've been at it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But like, I get frustrated on myself because I'm like, man, I'm just not teaching like R.C. Sproul and Paul Washer and Vodi Bakum. And people are like, dude, you've been at it for 10 years.
Yeah.
They've been at it for
a long
50
time.
years. Yeah. They've been like, give yourself some grace and some patience, dude.
So true. I always think Vodi Bakum has a saying that it's one of my favorites, but he'll say something and he'll say, if you can't say amen, you better say ouch.
You ought to say ouch. Yeah. And he says that deep guttural, like So Abram is at that same place where he's waited. And now he's getting the same promise again. It's just kind of revamped and a little bit clearer maybe, but that doesn't mean he is happening right now.
No.
But what we get next is this just insane interaction. And we might dive into it. I don't know. But the theology of this is wild. But it says first that Abram believed the Lord and he credited to him as righteousness, which most people believe that this is like Abram's salvation moment. And salvation in God has and always will be through faith alone.
Right.
And even the offerings and sacrifices that they gave, those were all offered by faith.
Right.
In obedience to God's word. But now our salvation is in faith in God. And everything that we do is by obedience, not by like this works-based righteousness. But then it says, he also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. And he said, Lord God, how can I know that I'll possess it? Which again, when we get promises and we have to wait, more often than not, there's more questions than there are answers.
Yeah, true. That's very true. We don't always know what the next thing is, right? We just got to hold on to the truth that he shares.
And I think Abraham's pretty lucky with what he just experienced, because a lot of the times God just says, like, stay in your lane,
Yeah.
Just trust.
Yeah, trust.
But,
I got this.
But God said to Abram, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So he brought all these to him, cut them in half, and laid the pieces opposite each other. But he did not cut the birds in half. The birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. And as the sun was setting, a deep sleep came over Abram, and suddenly great terror and darkness descended on him. Then the Lord said to Abram, know this for certain, your offspring will be resident aliens for 400 years in a land that does not belong to them and will be enslaved to the oppressed. This is all of Exodus, by the way. They were enslaved for about 400 to 420 years. And it says, however, I will judge the nation they serve, and afterward they will go out with many possessions, but you will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And here's the crazy part. When the sun had set and it was dark, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch appeared and passed between the divided animals. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, I give this land to your offspring, from the brook of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hethites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. So here's what's so important about what we just read. Back in the Old Testament times, covenants were huge.
Yeah.
And there was a couple different covenant ways that they would do things. A lot of like touching each other's thighs, which is Lance loves to demonstrate this. But serious, like these like deadly serious covenants are when you have somebody and you place somebody in front of you and have like a line of these dead animals, right?
Right.
And you guys would exchange your covenants for one another. And the person who was first up or whatever would present their covenant, their promises to the other person, and then they would walk through the dead animals to the other person. And when they did that, what they were saying was, I make this covenant, I promise, and I will fulfill my end. And if I do not, they're essentially saying, let me be like these animals. Let me be killed. Let me be split in half and slaughtered.
Yeah.
And then the other person does the same thing, sometimes, not all the times. And this is the severity that God takes his promises.
Yeah.
He did not have to do this. What God does not lie. He doesn't change his mind. He does exactly what he says. But he's giving Abraham an earthly representation of how serious he's taking this. And he's literally saying, Abraham, I will do what I'm saying. And if I don't, then split me in half.
Yeah.
And of course, like, you're not going to kill God, but he's meeting Abraham on his level,
in a way that he would understand it.
Yeah.
Like he understands the impact of this covenant.
Yeah. And he's making a covenant with Abraham, which is, that's a whole podcast in itself. But the thing is that the Lord takes his promises seriously.
Yeah.
They're not, like Abram, when he was like, God, how is any of this going to happen? You haven't even given me kids. How am I going to possess the land? What I love is that God didn't come to Abram and say, look, this is how it's going to go down. In the next 20 years, you'll have a kid, I'm going to send plagues, wipe out all these people. You can have the land. Instead, what he did was he just said, look, you don't need to know the plans, but you do need to know me.
Right.
And what you need to know about me right now is that I'm telling you that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
I'll do the rest. You believe me.
Yeah. And that still resonates so true since,
Yeah.
right? We don't have to know the plans. And that's a part of the waiting is I think people desire to know all the details.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard part is surrendering that, saying, Lord, and part of it is knowing who God is, right? It is knowing who he is, knowing that he takes care of us. Like everything we have is from him. Everything, all he does in our lives are part of the story that he's writing in it, or through it. But we have such a hard time with trusting him in those moments. And so I think the other part is if I had all the details, I might try to do some of those. You know what I mean? I might try to force it.
Manipulate it to happen.
Manipulate it for my benefit, knowing that is. But I think when we do that, we take away the glory that is only God's, and we are trying to elevate ourselves to something that only it's his plan. Like, let him handle it.
Yeah.
Because if it's of man, it's going to fail, So,
and there's so many times in the Bible where the answer is not specifics. The answer is just revealing the character and nature of God.
Yeah.
I think of Job, for instance. They spend 36 chapters just debating, Job, you sinned. No, I didn't. And then Job's like, God, you're going to answer me. And God's like, bet. And God came down to Job in a whirlwind, and instead of telling Job like, hey, Satan came up here and was like talking smack, instead God just said, dude, who made the stars and the ocean? Like, he just went on for chapters just being like, I am God. This is who I am.
Let me remind you of who I am.
Yeah, you're going to tell me that I'm going to, I need to answer to you? No, you need to trust who I am. And this, like you just literally just said, the same is true in waiting. Because you can wait years and years and years. And there's even been instances where things have been promised and the person never saw it come to fruition.
Right.
Abraham never saw the Israelites enter into the promised land. He just was promised, your people are going to go in there. But Abraham died well before they even got to Egypt.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But the thing is that doesn't discredit God's credibility. Is that first of all, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we can define God's promises based off of like our expectations.
No.
You can't determine like, okay, if God is going to do this, then he's going to do it this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Because God's ways are not our ways. And so the ways that he does, and that's the thing of looking back in hindsight, you can see God's hand over all the things. And sometimes it's better that way because like we were saying earlier, there's a less chance of you manipulating and messing it up. But I've never heard of any stories where people have looked back gone through a hard season of life and looked back and been like, wow, God could have done it this way. I mean, it would have been easier for you, but the lessons learned, the character developed, like all of that stuff could not have been done that way. God knows, and he sees all the angles. Like if you think of how multifaceted anything is, God's got all facets covered.
Yeah.
Whereas we might just focus on one.
And he's like in the future, he knows like, and I always find comfort in believing that whatever God is having me wait for, I like to think that like he's already tipped over the first domino somewhere that I don't even, and like things are falling into place and like it's happening right now. And I don't even know it's happening right now, but it is.
Yeah.
So God takes his promises and the things that he says extremely seriously. But then you mentioned something earlier about control and manipulating the outcome. And that's exactly what happens next.
Yeah.
I'm sure, okay, like if this was me, I would run home and tell my wife right away. I mean, like I would be running so fast. Yeah. And so Abram's wife in chapter 16, Sarai, had not borne any children for him, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. And if you haven't read this story, I feel like you can see where this is going. Mm-hmm. And Sarai said to Abram, since the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, go to my slave. Perhaps through her, I can build a family. And Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar, her Egyptian slave, and gave her to her husband Abram as a wife for him. And this happened after Abram had lived in the land of Canaan 10 years. So we're talking that this could have been up to 10 years after.
It could have been, yeah.
And that's still a long time. I mean, that's a long time. And Sarah was about 100 years old. Well, not quite 100 years old yet, actually, but later on she gets there. And I think 100 is where she has her first kid. But this is exactly what Sarai did. Abram probably went, shared with her this vision, shared with her that everything that's going on. And then she starts... thinking
about how we're going to make this happen. God already said it's going to happen. Now let me take control of this. And
like her logistics weren't off, right?
I mean, I don't know how old she's in her late. She's not young.
She's old. Yeah.
She's not a young chicken. So she's thinking very earthly.
Yeah.
Right.
Logically, even. Yeah. The thing about miracles are people are like, well, those miracles are just impossible. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point. It's a miracle. It goes against the laws. Yeah. And so I can imagine Sarai being like, it'd be a miracle for me to have a baby at this age. So let's figure this out. What are some of the excuses that you think we come up with that would cause us to want to control or want to manipulate God's plans?
Sometimes I think it could be the outcome. It could be the timing. It could be, I think some of the thought of it is, well, he's already blessed it. So we're just going to make it happen. God already said it's going to happen. So, but I think, a lot of times people are just wanting to, they don't want to wait.
That's really what it all boils down to.
They just don't want to wait. They just want it when they want it. And so, yeah.
I think of that statement that was told to me all the time, that God helps those who help themselves. And I'm like, okay, if I was Sarah, I could imagine being Sarah and being like, okay, let's look at the facts. God has promised Abraham a lot of kids. He did not promise Abraham a lot of kids through me. Just that he was going to have an heir. And it's like, I'm too old. My slave is younger. Maybe maybe she's the one he can have a kid with, I can adopt it and whatever. And it's that thought of thinking, maybe God needs me to like maybe he needs me to like take the first step.
Yeah.
Maybe he needs help essentially.
Maybe that's it, is that God needs, that's funny. Maybe God needs help.
Yeah. and like, you're the one.
Yeah.
You're the one that can help.
So this is what God's promised. So I'm going to make it happen. Yeah. That's interesting.
And this is the downside of rejecting to wait is you begin to take control. And the story of this goes completely south because first of all, times were different back then. Mm-hmm. Multiple wives were a thing, but also I can see this happening today where this like, hey, I'm barren, but that girl, she could probably have kids. Why don't you? And him being a guy, he's like, hey, don't threaten me with a good time. Like, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
I'll give it. Oh, someone has to. I guess I'll try. And he has this baby and Sarah just turns awful. He has a Ishmael.
Yeah.
She treats Ishmael and Hagar terribly. They end up running off. And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the Islam nation come through Hagar?
Yeah. And also the other thing was Hagar also would like jab at her. Like you couldn't even, like I'm the one that had the kid,
So
that it created a real toxic, very, it would be a popular reality TV show in today's age, this storyline, right? But it created a lot of tension, things. And I think that's part of what happens when you try to manipulate is instead of being patient and waiting on the Lord and you try to take control into your own hands is you're not necessarily tracking all these decisions down to the final outcome. You're just kind of moving, you're kind of just being reactive. And so the story is very clear of how it all goes down,
Yep.
They kind of get the boot and it's still, God doesn't leave. Like God's promises is his promise. And you still see Abraham mentioned so many more times in other books of what God says he promised Abraham. But now there's another scenario to deal with.
Yeah. Like you just said, I think that this is oftentimes the outcome of control when we make it happen for ourselves by any mode or thought of or excuse of why we're doing it. When it's not of God, it's just not as good. And I can imagine Abram, like maybe he had this baby and he's like, okay, well, maybe like this is it.
There we go.
I've had my kid. And sometimes when we do take matters into our own hands, like we can make some kind of,
there can
progress.
be results. Yeah.
But there's just such a difference when you do it versus when God does it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note that if you do take matters into your own hands, even if you get results, God still has a way of making his things work out. But there is a level of like dependence and submission that we need to show on top of it, Or maybe exactly what happened to Abram. You take things into your own hands, you get some results, and all of a sudden things go belly up and they don't turn out.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened?
Yeah. And that's kind of, I think sometimes that's where you'll hear the God, where are you? How could this have happened? Like, where are you when I needed you? Or those kinds of scenarios. But it's true. We need to fully surrender to him and wait patiently on the things that he has promised or lean on him and keep him at the center of all the things, trusting him for his best, because his best always, even if you did control it and there was an outcome, his ways are always going to be way better.
Always better.
Yeah, always better. And then you're not the main character. Because I think a lot of people, when you control things, it becomes about yourself. You can puff yourself up and say, well, I did this, but then there's no glory to God in that, even though God does have a plan way better than anything we can picture or fathom. And we're never the main character.
Yeah, we are never the main character. God, it is always for our good, but always, always, always for his glory.
Yeah.
And God's glory is shown in this story as Sarah eventually does have a kid. And when that happens...
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Yeah, imagine that God actually
What?
did what he said he was going to do. These angels or these three visitors show up and tell Abram, like, hey, you're going to have your kid soon. And Sarah actually laughed. You can read all of this in chapter 18 of Genesis. And they're like, why'd you laugh? And she's like, I didn't. They're like, you did laugh though. And the reason why Sarah laughed is because she was like 100 years old or something.
Yeah.
And Abraham's promise was given when he was 25. So this is 25 years in the making.
Yeah.
If that. I mean, we don't know his exact age. We just know that she was old. And so it might have even been more than 25 years of just waiting. And I'm sure that Sarah had this moment of having her kid and looking back and being like, I kind of ruined Ishmael and Hagar's life.
Yeah.
Because
so many other people were affected by that one decision.
If like any of our viewers have felt like the Lord was leading them into a season, maybe you feel like God is calling you to be a missionary to China or to go to YWAM or to enter pastoral ministry, whatever. And yet doors are closing, things aren't happening, whatever. How do we wait well? If we don't want to fall into Sarah's mistakes and control, is doing nothing the right answer?
I don't think doing nothing is ever the right answer. I think waiting is not the same as doing nothing, right? There's still always something to do. It's grow deeper in your walk with Christ, surround yourself with other people that can give you wise counsel. There's so many other things that are so important as you're waiting on the Lord, and just seeking him through prayer, through reading the word. Like there's so many things that we should be doing for our own personal walk, but also as we're waiting on that next step, doing nothing is never going to be the answer. Whenever I come upon any situation where I'm like, man, I don't know, like nothing is working out. Well, maybe the answer is maybe it's not the thing, that could just be simply the answer. And sometimes there's other things that need to happen first, and that's a part that we have to wait on the Lord for, because he's going to reveal those things when the time is appropriate. Thinking through your situation of like going down to Colorado and coming back to COTS and then starting your church and now where you're at now. I mean, all of those played a part, but if you would have tried to have all the answers up front of where God was taking you, I don't know if you would have been ready.
Yeah.
Would you have been ready? Would you have been able to do the things that he's calling you to do now without the lessons learned along the way?
Each one of those stages taught me something.
Yeah.
And that is, like I said, God's not in the business of wasting your time. So if you are in a season of waiting, he's doing something. Like, not only is he doing something out there that is going to affect you when the time comes, but he's also doing something in your life.
Yeah.
And I've had people ask me this question before, like, well, what do I do? And I always just go back to saying, do what you know to do.
Yeah.
Keep growing in your relationship with the Lord. That is the number one thing. God is not going to put you in ministry if you're going to make an idol out of ministry. Go into ministry putting first your relationship with God. Because Paul Washer once said that ministry is the biggest idol.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Easy.
I am so guilty of it.
Yeah.
And I find myself reading to prepare for messages way more than I read to just like enjoy time with God. And I'm like, I've got to correct this.
Yeah.
Because
you got to keep the main thing.
Yeah.
And that is God. And I think sometimes some people in ministry, you get caught up in doing the things for the Lord. It's a kind of a Martha Mary thing.
Yeah.
We get caught up doing all the things. I remember one time when my kids were younger, we lived just down the street. The kids would go to bed and I would tell my husband, I'm going to run back to the church and finish working on this thing. And I work in children's ministry. And so at one point he was like, well, at the time it was family ministry. Now we just focus on children. One night he stopped me and he goes, it's ironic because you're sacrificing our family on the altar of family ministry. And I was just
oh
like,
my gosh.
Yeah, for me, it was so guttural. It was he's been so supportive in ministry opportunities and the fact that I get to do ministry like this. And it's been a huge gift. But for me, it was a reality check of what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? He's so true. And so for me, that reshaped the way I do ministry. And there was even a lesson in that for me that the Lord showed me in my ministry, apart from my family. But in my role as a ministry leader, the lesson for that is to help other people, especially for me in the role that I'm in. A lot of the people that I work with are moms and women. So it's like my staff, I have a lot of women on staff who are moms and wives. And for me, the gift in that was to help them in balancing that out. I had experienced it in my own life, and I had something to offer that only God could show me the way that he showed me. that I was so caught up in doing the things for him that I wasn't necessarily being the person that he had called me to be in my own home, in the way that I was discipling my own kids and, being a wife and a mom. And so that was a reality check for me in the role that I was doing in ministry. So it's so easy.
That is, yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. And we can get caught up doing the things for the Lord. Again, like Martha and Mary, we can get caught up in doing all the things and not being. And I think that's the part that we have to check ourselves regularly.
Yeah.
There's so many people that get burnt out in ministry. There's so many. A lot of people are like, you've been doing ministry for how many years? I've been in the same role not the same role, but in the same ministry for 17 years.
I once heard that like the average pastor is only a pastor for like 7 years.
Yeah.
And that's insane.
Oh, there's so many people that I've done ministry with over the years that I have so much respect, that have mentored me and walked with me, and I have done ministry with, that are no longer in the vocation at all. Not that they're not still pastoring, but it's just interesting how ministry can really burn people out. It's a lot. You think about the spiritual warfare just in that alone, as your role is to disciple people and point them to Jesus.
Yeah.
The attacks of the enemy on that. I mean, it's not even like moral failure. I'm talking just burnout. It's a real thing.
Well, and it's important you say that, because a lot of the times that what God is having us wait for, like, it's exciting because usually it's a big thing we're waiting for, or sometimes also it's like you're waiting for cancer results to come back, or sometimes it's a positive wait, sometimes it's a negative wait. But on the positive scale, sometimes we get so excited for the scope of what's coming that we forget the reality of that situation.
Yeah.
And if God is calling you to, like I mentioned earlier, be a missionary in China.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's going to be very hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's not an easy thing to go to a place where Christianity isn't allowed.
Yeah. Where there's an underground church. Like, that's your first teller of like, okay, this might not be an easy path.
Yeah. So maybe God is having you wait so that he can instill things in you that you're going to need when you get there.
Yeah.
And being a pastor, like starting the dwelling place, it was not easy. It was very fun, very exciting, but it was very hard. It reminds me of my relationship with Savannah. We had a super duper tough dating relationship or courtship, whatever. And there was so many times that I almost broke it off with her. She almost broke it off with me too, and we've talked about this. I don't know if I was saying it. I feel like it was the Lord saying it, but I just felt like the Lord just kept saying every now and then, if she's worth it, keep going. And so I was just like, okay, is she worth the frustration today? And the answer was always yes, because I believed better days were coming.
Yeah.
And they did. We got married, and our first year was really tough. But then after that, it just got better and better. And 10 years later, we're happier than we've ever been.
Yeah.
But what I did during those times of just waiting for the better day was to be faithful today.
Yeah.
Even though today is hard dating you, not because of her, but just because of life. And
everything. Everything.
It was like, I'm going to be a good boyfriend today, and I'm just going to do what I know to do. So here's some flowers. And that was that. But then we had to do that for a long time before we got married.
We talk about, when scripture talks about manna for the day, right? The manna for the day was enough. And for you, when you were just focusing on being the boyfriend, the partner for her in that moment, even when things were hard. So then when we look at, if we don't trust God's future in the present, then we deny God's future over the future. Deny God's control over the present. You just being present right then and trusting God for the future in the present.
So say that again. What was that line?
If we don't trust God's future in the present, we deny God's control over the present. And so that your dating
that's
scenario,
hardcore.
But it's so true. It's like you're trusting the Lord right now for what he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, because the ultimate, life is full of things that we wait for. But the ultimate thing that we're waiting for is not something we're going to experience on this life.
Yeah.
When you are waiting on the test results to come back from a medical appointment, is because we live in an imperfect world.
Right.
When I felt like if she's worth it, keep going, it's because our relationship was not perfect because we live in an imperfect
Yeah.
world. We go through imperfect waiting on this earth because we are actually waiting for perfection,
Yeah.
for life with God.
Yeah.
So-
and that's the waiting, it's like we live in this fallen, broken world that at one time was perfect, right?
Yeah.
But because of sin, it's the world that we are. And so scripture talks about this groaning, right?
Is that Romans 8?
Romans 8.
Let's just look at it.
Romans 8, starting in 18, says, and I mean, even as we're reading it, what you just said even connects. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. For creation eagerly waits with anticipation for God's Son to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will be set free from the bondage to decay into the glorious freedom of God's children. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. Not only that, but we ourselves, who have the Spirit as the first fruits, we also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Now in this hope we are saved. But hope that is seen is not hope, because who hopes for what he sees? Now, if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with patience.
We eagerly wait. Yeah. That's tough to do, to eagerly wait.
To eagerly wait. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like that's waiting with expectation.
Yeah.
When I tell my daughter Atlee, like, hey, on Thursday, it might be Tuesday. On Thursday, we're going to go to the trampoline park.
Yeah.
She asks me every 5 minutes, is
Yeah.
it Thursday yet?
Yeah.
And she's eagerly waiting for the trampoline park. And we as believers, the reward of our faith and of our eager waiting is all going to be condensed down to just 6 words. The well done, good and faithful servant.
That's right.
Like when we look at Jesus in the eyes and he says those words to us, we will feel like all the waiting we did on earth was just completely worth it. And all of the confusion that comes with waiting.
Yeah.
You said earlier, like, why God, or where are you, God? Or like the questions and confusion that come up in waiting, they will all make sense when you look at the eyes of Jesus.
Yeah, it's so true. And so at the beginning of this, it says, for I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed to us. I mean, it's so true. When it pales in comparison, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so these things seem minor. Not that Paul's saying that they don't matter. He's just kind of giving us a bigger picture of what is to come. And so because this is a broken, fallen world, this is part of it, but what's to come is so much bigger.
So it sounds like with that sentence that you said,
if we don't trust God's future in the present, we deny God's control over the present.
okay, so it sounds like we're saying that if we trust that like this day is coming,
Yeah.
then we are able to trust that he has today in control. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's exactly true. And that's that's an example of the waiting. So then we go back to like you're at a fork in the road of what are you going to do? Are you going to hope and wait, or are you going to control and manipulate, and you're going to, like, how do we handle all those things?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the beauty of just trusting in the Lord. I mean, the alternative seems rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing is that like we believe that God is sovereign, which means that he's in control.
Mm-hmm.
So when we try to take the waiting and force things to happen, we're actually trying to move into the role of God.
That's right. And that's the problem, is when we try to elevate ourselves to his role, he either comes down or we elevate, right? Like that's what ends up happening, instead of just trusting him with what he has for us.
And you find out so quickly that there's a reason that God is who he is, and we are who we are, because we are not good at being God.
We are not good at being God. Yeah, definitely not. I would agree. So when we talk about waiting, we have 5 kids, and all 4 of our oldest is a girl, and then the rest are boys. Oldest is 25, almost 26, but so from 26 and down for the sons. and they all play football. They all play football, all of them. And we love football because they loved football and that was their sport. Well, the oldest son goes off and plays college football. Second son has gone off to play college football. Third son is in high school and it's about time for him to start getting recruited. So that's the next season of his life that he's going through. And then we have our 12-year-old who also plays football. Well, the second son, he plays football. He's played Division I football in Las Vegas. So he's been there. He transferred to UCLA for a season and then finished his college career back in Las Vegas. But he's in a season right now. And football, maybe also, I'm sure all sports, there is a lot of waiting and you don't know if you're going to play. You don't know if you're going to start. You don't know, you prepare and do all the things. And then you wait to see, like, did I get it? Like, am I going to be the guy, And so for him, that's been his career. But now he's at this place. He's finished college football and he decided that he wants to enter the NFL draft. So
all right.
he is doing all the things. He's doing his workouts and we're waiting, and once he does his pro day, we'll be waiting to see what that next thing is. And an example for us in the waiting is we can wait patiently knowing God has his story. Like God knows where he's going.
Yeah.
Or we can try to manipulate all the things. And in that, not manipulate, we can try to control. And in that control, our lives could be affected so negatively by like worrying and the anxiety that can be created from the stress of it all. And we've opted to just trust the Lord in this. And so we're here with our boy, like, all right, Lord, like whatever you have for him, it's going to be the best, whatever it is. If he gets to play football at that next level and gets to do that, that's awesome. And if his time has come to an end with college football and he gets to adult, we're excited for that too, for him. And he's even at that place too. And I think it could be a scary place, or it could be so exciting to just see what God has next for him, because his identity is not football. And I think that's for us, the biggest thing is that we've raised our kids knowing like your identity is in Jesus alone. And you get to do all these fun things and he gives you these platforms to glorify him through. But your identity is not football. Football goes away. You're still, you're still this amazing kid who loves the Lord, because then God's going to call you into something different and something new. And I think that's for our family, the waiting and just trusting the Lord for his best isn't even like waiting, saying, okay, God, it's NFL or bust. It's not. It's kind of like, man, what a cool opportunity to use your platform in a bigger light to glorify the Lord. Or you get to adult and go out and get a job in a career and do whatever God's called you to do. But it just shows two different paths of like, man, all your hope is in that, or is all your hope in the Lord,
Yeah. Ultimately, what like your son and what all of us are waiting for is what God has next for us.
Yeah. It's just what God has next. It's just for whatever the next thing is. And I don't want to control 10 steps down the path when God calls me to just trust him in this next one. And when he says move, I move. And if he says don't move, then I'm not moving. Like I'm waiting right here, and I think that's the faithfulness of the Lord in that.
And before we close out, I just want to bring up that Jesus was also no stranger at waiting. Something that Francis Chan said that I really enjoyed, his was actually talking about leading a quiet life, but I think it applies to here too, was Francis Chan said something like, what do we know about Jesus before ministry? He's like, we know that he was a carpenter, and at 12, he ran away from home to go to the temple, But like, what about when Jesus was 23? We don't know anything. 25, nothing, still a carpenter. And at 28, still a carpenter. We don't know anything about Jesus except for his birth, that time he was 12, and then he started ministry at 30.
Yeah.
30 years, Jesus waited to begin really the thing he came on earth to do. And in the meantime, what did he do? He was a carpenter, and he devoted his life to his Father.
Yeah.
And then his time came.
Yeah.
I think that Jesus is of course, he is the ultimate example of what waiting looks like, which is, as Francis Chan said, a humble, quiet life that Jesus did, but it's being faithful with today.
Yeah. With what where God has you now. It's like your ministry field is right here. I've never felt called to go. I've never felt like God has called me to go and do missions other than with missions trips, but I've never felt like I needed to uproot and go somewhere and go do the thing. With the story that God has written in my life, my ministry field has always been children, like kids and sharing the gospel with children, and then the community that he's placed me in. And so I've been so intentional to get involved. I substitute teach. I'm the football booster mom. Because that's the ministry field God has put me in, is this community. And so where God has placed me, that's where I'm going to do ministry. And until he calls me into something different, I'm just going to be right here waiting for him to show me what's next.
And even with the negative thing, let's say you're waiting for the test results to come back and they come back positive. That happened to my dad, right?
Yeah.
Receiving the thing you didn't want that you were waiting for, does not mean that faithfulness and obedience go out the window.
No.
We are faithful in the midst of, like Paul was saying here in Romans 8, in suffering. We are still faithful.
We are.
Ministry still prevails. God's glory is still able to be shined through in the best and the worst parts of our life.
Yeah.
And so maybe you're waiting for the next thing. Maybe I have friends who don't feel any kind of call or direction in their life at all.
Yeah.
And they've been waiting for years and years and years and have no idea they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, then just live faithfully today.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too, is you might be waiting for something, not knowing God's already using you where you're at. Like you might be waiting for this, and you don't realize the impact you're having in the lives around you right here in your workplace, and you just may never know. And maybe that is the waiting, in that waiting, still being faithful to shine a light for Christ in everywhere you're at in the present.
I really want to address that because you shared something that's super duper important, which is, even if you're waiting for something, don't live in the future.
Yeah.
The only future we live in is eternity.
Yeah.
But if God is having you wait, that does not mean neglect
To pause.
today.
Yeah, that doesn't mean to be stagnant. There's so many people who love the Lord that planned for things in the future and they never got to see it.
Yeah.
I had a friend who loved the Lord and she was awesome and she did so much ministry. And her husband, she knew just because of his health issues, he wasn't going to be around in 20 years. So she started planning for her life after he passed away. I mean, financially planning, just being responsible with what God had given her, knowing that she had so much ministry to do after. And so she was kind of preparing for that, knowing within the next few years he was going to pass on. She ended up getting cancer and passed away before he did.
Wow.
And she was so present in ministry today, but she was also planning for a life without him, not knowing that God was going to call her home before that even came to fruition. And I'm so glad that she didn't live in the future. She was still so very present in her ministry today, because she never got to see that.
Yeah.
And
And those are the lessons, like your friend and my grandma, that we get to glean wisdom from.
Yeah.
And I hope that God has Apple Podcasts in heaven so that they can hear us talking about them. We can get so wrapped up in our future that we forget that God has called us to today.
Yeah.
Be faithful to the Lord today.
Yeah.
Well, Vanessa, I like to do this with everybody. If our podcast listeners skip forward to the last minute of our episode and only hear one thing, what's the one thing about this that you want people to walk away remembering?
I would say to be faithful in the waiting. God has written these beautiful stories in our lives. Our testimonies are amazing. And part of that is to be faithful in the waiting. We're going to go through seasons of lots of wonderful things that he has called us to. And then we're also going to go through seasons of just waiting patiently on the Lord. And he is still just as good of a father in those seasons as when we are just full on doing ministry and doing all the things. And for people who are newer in their faith, God is working in every second of every day. And you don't always see it. And a lot of times you'll see it in hindsight. But God is always working in our lives, even when it seems like there's a season of the wait. God is still at work in all of it. And so the gift would be to recognize what God is doing in the present and not focusing so much on what's to come.
Yeah.
And to lean in fully on him and to recognize him in all the things. So that's not just one thing, but it's a lot of things.
Perfect. You know what that reminds me of is going back to that story about telling my daughter we'll go to the trampoline park on Thursday, is that she's so excited for Thursday to come that she is bored for the next 2 days.
Oh, yeah.
Because nothing will be as good.
Nothing compares to what's to come.
But if she would just play with her toys today, the days would go by faster.
Yeah, yeah.
And Thursday would come.
Yeah.
I would say if I left with just one thing, I think the same thing. Like if Jesus could wait, you can wait too. I'm talking to 16-year-old PJ right now, you know. Jesus waited, and when his time was up or ready, he jumped on it. So live in today, wait patiently on the Lord, and also allow yourself to be excited. Have that eager expectation. If it's not an exciting thing you're waiting for, then allow that excitement to still be turned into hope. That hope that whatever's coming and whatever God has you waiting for, that if he is in control, which he is, that you can trust his plan in your life and that his plan is good. And ultimately, like we said earlier, it's for your good, but for his glory. And if he is glorified, that's all we desire.
Yeah.
And then look forward to that day where you see Jesus eye to eye and everything makes sense, you know? Well, it has been just so good to have you on the show.
Thanks.
I am 100% having you on again. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this is great. Love it. Love the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys next time.